Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art, where we do deep dives into deep cuts and help you understand why damn things matter. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art in film, filmmaking, and direction. By focusing on the career of filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, focusing on the years of 1950 to 1965. To hash it out, I'm joined by our very own Scream Queen, our resident master of fashion in all things art, and that is Miss Alexandra Parsons of alexandraparsons.com. Miss Parsons, welcome back.
Oh, thank you. I'm very excited.
You're welcome. We've been talking about this for a month now. We're busting at the seams, as we like to say here. I just finished the very last film in the filmography right before we started recording, so I am fucking born ready for this show. Now, why are we talking about him today? Mr. Hitchcock is, of course, regarded as one of the most influential figures in the history of cinema. He helped shape what has become the thriller genre before it even had a name. Now, of course, before we can discuss, we all need a little background. Sir Alfred Joseph Hitchcock was born on August 13th, 1899 in Leytonstone, Essex, England. He entered the film industry in 1919 as a title card designer and made his first feature his directorial debut with the silent film The Pleasure Garden in 1925. And the rest, as they say, is history. He's won 2 Golden Globes, 8 Laurel Awards, and 5 Lifetime Achievement Awards, including the very first BAFTA Academy Fellowship Award and an AFI Lifetime Achievement Award. He was nominated 5 times for an Academy Award for Best Director, but unfortunately, plot twist, he never actually got one. His picture, Rebecca, was nominated for 11 Oscars and won Best Picture. In 2012, Hitchcock's Vertigo displays Citizen Kane as the British Film Institute's greatest film ever made. And by 2021, 9 of his films had been selected for preservation by the U.S. National Film Registry. Before we hash it out, of course, we need a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by the novel The Entropy Sessions, a tale of loss, love, and madness, and our past, present, and future relationships with technology. Find it on Amazon and as an audiobook through Audible. Your support helps us continue our journey. Now back to the show. So the first thing that we need to talk about today, Miss Parsons, is the fact that I found it fascinating that Hitchcock was one of the first to make himself a bit of a brand, right? He was a brand within and of himself as a film director. He had cameos in his movies, he did interviews, and of course he did Alfred Hitchcock Presents from 1955 to 1965, playing host duties for an anthology TV show series that focused on the things that he loved, suspense and thrillers and shit like that. And we just never have seen this before, right? Now, his style includes editing and camera movements to mimic the person's gaze, right? Turning the audience into what are known as voyeurs, or focusing on what is known as voyeurism, maximizing anxiety, fear, stress, tension, and of course the sense of the thrill, which is, of course, why the genre is named after that. Now, he has done famous devices, or he helped not only coin techniques and things of that nature. Probably the biggest one is, do you know what a Macguffin is? A Macguffin is that thing in a movie where either all the characters are chasing after it, or it's one item that actually doesn't have any value in the plot. So a good example of this is the microfilm in North by Northwest, or the $40,000 in Psycho. So nothing was ever resolved in those things. It was just a plot device to further the plot itself and make the characters move forward to get to the thrilling and suspenseful parts.
Yeah, because it's Psycho. They're just like, well, what about that 40,000? They're just like, it's in the mud.
It's in the swamp.
That's it. You're like,
yeah,
what? No one's gonna go get it.
Yeah. So obviously, we need to talk about his major themes before we focus on the films themselves. So as already stated, voyeurism, mistaken identity, torn personalities, and of course, the psychopathic tendencies of his characters. His go-to actors and actresses include Cary Grant, which I would argue. So this is the guy in To Catch a Thief, North by Northwest. I think he helped to kind of shape that cool, debonair leading man at the time, that we eventually got with the James Bond series, things of that nature. And coincidentally, fucking Sean Connery was his leading man, and Marnie, the last of the films we're going to discuss today.
Yes.
As well as Ingrid Bergman, Jimmy Stewart. I've been working on a James
that was
Stewart
good.
impression. That was pretty good, right?
Oh,
yeah.
What are you doing over there?
This is Jimmy Stewart. Wait just a minute here. Gee whiz. So that's my James Stewart. And, you guys can book me.
He loved James Stewart. It wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Cary Grant. Yeah, they were in 4 films throughout. Only 2, I think, in this decade and a half that we're going to focus on in the show today, but he was in 4 films just like James Stewart. And then, of course, we can't forget the timeless beauty that is Grace Kelly. My God.
Oh my God.
She is an absolute stunner, and one of his favorite go-to actresses before she became a real life princess in real life. So let's go ahead and dive in. So in 1950, we're starting with film Stage Fright. And it depicts the story of a man on the run, accused of murder, and an old flame that aims to clear his name. But as the journey evolves, all is not what it seems. Miss Alexandra. Oh, we should talk about this before we actually dive into the pieces. So Miss Alexandra the Great started from the hits, started from the earliest work, and worked her way back. I started at the roots, 1950 Stage Fright, and worked my way up to the hits.
Yeah.
And ended, like I already joked about this morning, with Marnie. So what did you think of Stage Fright?
I liked it a bit because it was talky. I like to say talky because of all the monologues. I did fall asleep a few times, but I mean, which I was like embarrassed. That was a lie. Ended with Stage Fright, and you ended with Marnie, which is so funny. And then we didn't plan it that way, folks. We did not. I did it almost out of convenience, but also like there was an intent for me to start with Psycho and then Birds and Vertigo and all that stuff. But, Stage Fright, just like Strangers on a Train, it had that really beautiful aesthetic of like the black and white film, the shadowing from the lighting, the monologues. And like I started watching it with my dad, and he says he's never saw this. I enjoyed it. I liked it. It was a little like slow. My dad's like, I think it was stupid. That's my dad's thing. And I walked away.
Yeah, I really like Stage Fright, to be honest. Yeah.
You said that held a place in your heart. And I was like thinking about that and watching it. I was like, I think it's because it's that classic. You have like Marlene Dietrich, Hollywood, the acting. It does an homage to all of like the Academy of like actors, and it's very theatrical.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Yeah, no, and a lot of these, I'm glad you used the word theatrical, because a lot of these films, are either adapted from a novel or they came straight from the theater. Yeah. And we'll talk about that a little later. And that's why a lot of these films really kind of leaned on essentially creating what the theatrical version would be like if you saw it live and, in a playhouse, and put it to the screen. And that's where I felt like I enjoyed this one, because we were already starting to see that curve into him realizing that, he didn't have to do it specifically exactly like the theater did it. I mean, he always prided himself on being a visual storyteller. He came from silent film. You had to be a visual storyteller, but it was clear that once there was sound, we could hear the dialogue, they kind of relied a little too heavy on that. Like that's like when I was listening to some of these, I could listen to them in my car. They were so dialogue heavy. Like I could get everything I needed from the plot and things like that, that the visual language really wasn't always necessary. But as we went along and he had more balance, and then of course when he went truly back to his visual landscape, visual language roots, and really focused more on that, and that's where of course things like Vertigo, and we'll get to that a little later. But those kind of films come in where he was just hitting, he was in the fucking zone. But before we move on to Strangers on a Train, which is one of Miss Parsons' favorite, I do want to talk about a couple of other themes and things that I noticed right from the get-go when we focused on these this first decade is, and that it includes, he was always drawn to the concept of madness, psychological madness, right? But that I always noticed this about his stories. As much as there was always, a murder mystery, or we were following a protagonist that was going through a descent of madness, at the heart of his stories, honestly, to me, were always love stories.
It's very true. No, I was thinking that too. I want to try not to. I tend to digress a lot. I don't want to go off on a tangent too much. But yes, I was thinking that when I was watching, especially when I kind of laughed at a couple things, like when I watched Vertigo. At the end, we'll get there. I was kind of like, yeah, okay, so he just decided to go that way in Vertigo.
And no, I'm glad we talked about this in our pre-shows because, his films, I think we can talk about that now before we even get to Vertigo. His films would kind of abruptly end a lot. And it's like,
and that's how it ends. I was okay.
Yeah, like either he didn't know what to do with the ending, or he wanted to just leave it there and let the audience kind of let their imaginations fill in what happened with the resolution. Because now I think we have to talk about the dichotomy of what we're used to now, right? And that dichotomy is we're used to a climax happening, and then we have there's time for it to breathe, like the cops show up and they interview the victims, and we get time to resolve with these characters, that moment of resolution and closure, and even epilogues. Sometimes we see how they're doing in the future, things like that. Where with his films, they would just like cut to the credits. We're done. This is it. We're done here. And but I guess the point of bringing up those thematic elements was I always noticed that his films would have not A and B plots per se, but two parallel A plots. It would be the thriller, the suspense type of plot, the murder mystery, or the psychological madness type of elements. But then there would always be the love angle, the love interests, these two characters that are bound to each other, or and all the things that love represents, and things of that nature. And so let's move on to 1951's Strangers on a Train. Now, Miss Parsons, we never talked about this in our pre-shows, so let's do it right now. Why is this one of your favorites?
I was thinking about that, and why this is one of my favorites. And so I watched it a few times, and then I was like skimming through it again today. I think I just love the buildup of that so much, especially, and that was kind of like, I believe too, that one of the introductions to where, it's all very talky. It's the buildup of two men kind of planning this device. And you see that in his other films as well, like especially Dial M for Murder. You're like, is this 30 minutes of them just talking about this fucking murder? Like, and Strangers on the Train is just
the first act is just that, them figuring it out.
But Strangers on the Plane, you immediately are like, this guy's unwell. Like this guy is mentally unwell. And this poor other guy, he just like immediately builds up a character development of these two people. Like, this guy's kind of the sucker. This guy is mentally unwell. And then you just get kind of hooked, like, what's going to happen?
Yeah, let's give the good people a quick synopsis. So Strangers on a Train tells the story of two men who muse on the idea of trading murders and what happens when one goes through with it and the other declines. So that's what Miss Parsons has been hinting at so that's the basic premise. And then we get to see how that plays out. And yeah, this is another perfect example, just like the end of Stage Fright, that one of our lead protagonists is actually the psychopath that we are following along the whole time. And we're starting to see that visual language, I think, still evolve. There was always that strong use of lighting over the eyes thing, where it's just like a bar of light, right? And and we're seeing a lot more of that. But we're also seeing, especially with the carousel ending.
I always like laugh at really awkward scenes. Yeah. The carousel scene where it just like collapses. At the end, you're like, Jesus Christ. You're like, oh my God. It's so violent.
But think about if you were a young gal, your age, but back then, right?
Yeah.
Like, you'd never seen that before,
That's
right? Now
scary.
Now we're so used to these big fucking set pieces. Oh, we should do a little tangent corner and talk about this for a second. This is a good segue too. How refreshing was this to watch these films? Like, we're so used to fucking Thanos just like destroying the universe left and right.
And being visually overwhelmed and just like a overstimulated consistently.
Just to go back to like just like excellent character development and plotting and things really simple again. We've been so used to the alternative and my example with Thanos, that going back to these very, in a way, simple visual language type of films, but thought-provoking and really complex plots and narratives. I don't know. It was just kind of so nice to.
It was very refreshing, and being able to see, like you said, the character development and somebody that was so detail oriented. You could tell he was very meticulous in his filmmaking.
Famous for that.
And he, like in Strangers on the Train, like just how detailed he was on like focusing on the lighter, and like how he zoomed, and that was his like one of his specialties, right? Like zooming in on, what do you call it? Would the lighter be a Macguffin? Would that be?
Would the lighting be?
The lighter.
No, they actually used the lighter as a way to reveal that he was
the killer. He was the
killer. Yeah. So no, that wouldn't be a MacGuffin.
Okay, so that
because
they
used it in the plot to conclude, everything.
Okay, I was just trying to think like what was a MacGuffin in that film, but it was refreshing. It was nice. It was a lot of them. It just kind of confirmed why he still is a master of suspense to me, watching all these films or rewatching some of them, and as an artist and going to art school, why like the colorography and all of that was so important.
Yeah.
And why it was like embedded in us, and these still shots that we would watch, and like typography, and so it was very nostalgic a little bit for me, and it was like kind of touching base onto like the roots of inspiration as an artist, and so that was really good on a lot of levels for me.
Absolutely, yeah. And I kind of, just to piggyback off of that, to me, I had so many aha moments of like, oh, this is where that style or that trope or that theme comes from. Like I didn't quite fathom until we went down this journey of literally seeing all of these films in this frame, that I realized, oh my God, he coined or he designed or he invented so many of these very influential styles and things in film, and to this day it is copied. That I was like, and we'll get there in a minute, but before we do, of course, we need to talk about I Confess, 1953. I Confess tells the story of a Catholic priest that, when accused of murder, must decide between siding with the secular world and the holy rites he vowed to maintain, maintaining the very secrecy of confessions, even when one of those confessions were from the murderer himself. So I liked I Confess. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on it. Definitely check it out. I think the only thing I want to touch on before we move on to the big, leap in progression in his skill level and everything as an artist and filmmaker. The only thing I want to touch on I Confess is, again, get past, I know I just read the bio, the synopsis of the film, but underneath that, there is a woman that is in love with this priest, and that is part of the main paralleling plot. Yeah, let's say that's a word, sure. That alongside them trying to pin the murder on the priest because he's involved with it so much, and he's really just trying to maintain his vows, and he's not able to tell anybody the confessions of his, the people in his clergy, or however you want to say it.
He's not supposed to, right?
Yeah. And I wonder if that was fictional, or because today the complete opposite's true. If you so all you murderers out there, if you confess your murder to a priest, they are required by law to tell law enforcement. They can't fucking keep it to themselves. But for the purpose of this plot, he did that. But alongside of all that, he is pursued by this woman that is in love with him, and he's I don't. It's not clear if, I feel like there's love elements too from his side, but he has to stay true to his vow as a vow of celibacy as a priest.
Yeah, you see this. You could totally see that people current films and current shows have taken it from this movie, like Fleabag and the show Evil, which I kind of like. They do that too. There's just like a lot of repetitive this thing, like the woman's in love with the priest. There's not much to say about. No offense if somebody really loves this film. I wasn't that
actually tweet at us. I want to meet the people.
Yeah, I wasn't. I kind of got very distracted during it. I wasn't really that. I was like, okay, this is, and I usually am very much drawn to that, like, because growing up Catholic, I'm drawn to that. But I think maybe I just had too much going on, and I'd like to rewatch it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
no,
that's
problem.
Pretty much. Yeah. We do love Montgomery Clift, though. We do love him. My mom loves him.
So. Oh, how's Victoria?
She's good. Did
she listen to the show?
Not yet. I keep telling her to watch.
We have the censored one, guys. So I took out the curse words.
They're so cute because they're 80 and 81 and they like grew up watching a lot of these films and they love Hitchcock films.
Yeah.
And they had a lot to say about, we had dinner last night and it was it was a really good conversation bonding piece to talk to my parents about instead of
so you got to hash it out with the family. So you know, it was a little priming.
I didn't know this. Actually my new favorite one is Rear Window. Like I think that beats Strangers on a Plane. And I told my mom that. She goes, that's my favorite too, Allie. Oh my God. So we talked a lot about it. And just why we love it, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, before we get there, we have to talk about Dial M for Murder. In 1954, I think, as already hinted at, I think this is a big leap in his skill level as a director. So Dial M for Murder tells the story of a man who plots to kill his wife after he finds out that she's been cheating on him. But not everything goes according to plan when he tries to execute said plan. And almost now this is actually, Dial M for Murder has actually been recreated many times. Probably the biggest example of that, or the biggest adaptation of this film, is in the 90s, A Perfect Murder with Michael Douglas and Gwyneth Paltrow. So it was adapted. It wasn't an exact recreation because there was some plot elements that were either combined or changed entirely. Like at the end of, spoiler alert, at the end of A Perfect Murder, it's the wife that essentially discovers everything, whereas her former lover in the original helps to kind of discover it. And of course the police investigator. So this is another perfect example of, before I pass it back to you, Ms. Parsons, of this came from the theater. And it's clear because there's like one set that they're mostly at, and that's the interior of the house.
The monologue scene, right?
Yeah, they're almost most of the film, except for a couple of exteriors and one like dining scene that he's at. But I noticed, here's the difference for me, and this will probably be a good tee up for you, is I was so much more captivated. There was a lot of dialogue and monologues, and I don't think any soliloquies, but all of the traditional Shakespearean devices. But I didn't. I was so captivated and that's how he shot the scenes too. It wasn't just people talking and like you're in front of a live set of performers at a play. It was shot too in a way to be very captivating. And so I this is probably one of my favorites on the list.
Oh, that's great. I feel like in the beginning there was scenes where it was as if you were looking at it like an audience. And
and that goes back to his use to make the audience voyeurs. Like he wants to make you feel as if you're literally there with them, these characters. So that's by design.
Which I think that's why I love living in New York for so long too. Like I always loved like looking in people's windows. I'm a bit of a voyeur and like seeing how people live. Maybe that's why I loved Your Window so much. But this had that effect too. Was this the first one that Grace Kelly was in? Was this like an intro?
I think so. I don't remember off the top of my head because she was, I believe, 3 films.
Yeah.
And I think it was in a row. It was Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, and then To Catch a Thief. And then she became a princess. It was like, sorry, I gotta bounce.
Bitch. Yeah. Sorry, I don't need to
I'm out. I'm a princess now. I'm retired.
I loved it. I did have to rewind it a few times because I was like, oh shit, this is so heavy dialogue.
The plotting was very thick. And I think that's why, like, I kind of write that way. I overwrite just to give myself some self criticism. Thank you, Clayton, for reining me in with your editing. But so yeah, it's but it's still done in such a well-crafted way that even if you do have to kind of rewind, you're like, oh, aha, and oh, this and that, and
so beautifully done. Like simple as like picking up the coat, like
all these little details.
Yeah, just that's what I think I love. I do know I love about his stuff is those details oriented things, like the way he picks up the coat at the end to see if the key is, and that's kind of like the plot twist, like, oh, it's a simple thing that like he messed up at the key and he thought, can you say, you could probably say this a lot quicker than I can.
What?
the guy who kills her. I'm like going over my words. The guy that kills her, he put the key actually back where it was supposed to be.
Right. Yeah. He was supposed to keep it to make it look like it was stolen, but he ended up putting it exactly back. And that's how they caught him.
So there's a scene there's a scene where the inspector figures that out, but it takes like poor Grace Kelly goes to jail for a little bit. I'm like, really?
Poor all of his women. We should maybe do a little tangent corner on Miss Parsons as our resident voice of our female audience. How do you feel how Hitchcock depicts women in his films?
Well, I looked up the whole blonde thing. Did you look that up?
He loves his blondes. And he loves his beautiful blondes that are icy.
Yeah, and he says it's because they're less suspicious. Like people see a brunette and they'll suspect a brunette to be up to no good or be a little like have something under her, hiding in her sleeves. But with blondes, people are more easily, they could be more innocent looking, which is definitely, my sister I had a conversation with her and she was an actress for a long time. And she said that, it still hasn't changed. Everybody was a fucking blonde-haired, blue-eyed, those were the leads. It's just how it is. On the visual aspect, but that was not always true. There were a lot of beautiful brunettes as leads. But I think he's always making these women, like, some of them most of the women, except for maybe Strangers on the Train, like mentally unwell. Like, what mother issues do you have?
Well, he had there's complete debates about this from film historians that they go back and forth on their feelings of not only his sexuality and how maybe there was some repressed sexuality and that he would put it into his films, or repressed feelings about women or sexuality or what have you. And they started to seeing a lot of trends of course, the beautiful blonde, the beautiful icy blonde that always gets punished, at the end of his films or humiliated and things of that nature. As much as I saw that, since there's been, we have another 20, 30 years of cinema under both of our belts, I kind of looked at it in a way of, I felt like he gave equal footing to both men and women having dark sides, where that they would have villainous like sides, where, because we grew up in the 90s and the early aughts, and I felt like Hollywood went through this big phase of like only men are the bad guys and women are always the good guys, especially like in horror films, things of that nature. Like there was always like the last female standing kind of a thing, the things of that nature, where I felt like they went through this big shift, and then they finally are doing that again nowadays. That's why I always gravitate towards Gillian Flynn's work with Gone Girl and Sharp Objects. Like they're not, and these are female writers writing about female villains, and they're not shying away from women being these terrible human beings in their, as characters in their stories. And I felt like, as much as I think there was a lot of negative press against this, and there is, I think he did show a lot of disrespect for women. To me, there was also this element of like, well, yes, these men are psychopaths and terrible and shitty, but sometimes women can be this way too, or vice versa. So that's how I looked at it.
No, I think you're right, because at first I was feeling that he doesn't. Oh, he has some, like, these women are always like so dramatic and like, oh, that's also it's hilarious. Some of it was hilarious, or like they're mentally unwell. Yeah. But then you see it in Strangers on a Train, like that's like he's unwell.
The men are definitely sometimes terrible, terrible humans too. So I feel like the opposite
Rear
could be argued.
Even Vertigo. Oh my God! But
let's go ahead and dive into Rear Window while we're on the subject. So 1954, Rear Window. It tells the story of a man who plays a voyeur to all his neighbors through, as already hinted at in the title, his rear window. But things suddenly take a turn when he suspects that one of them may have committed murder. So I think this is another turning point. Before I pass it back to you, I think in terms of visual storytelling, it was clearly like these sets were built on a lot in Hollywood, like a Paramount lot or something like that. Because when he would actually pan over all of the people, the musician and the dancer and the husband and wife and the other couple that had the little dog, it's just like perfectly would pan, and we would, again, as the audience, become the voyeurs, becoming, going into the eyes of Jimmy Stewart and Jimmy Stewart impression again, James Stewart, and
I love that. It's good.
Is it pretty good? Yeah. No, gee whiz. And so I feel like, oh my God, this is a perfect example of once he was really honing in on his cinematography skills and things like that. And this has to be watched. You can't just listen to it.
It was so visually appealing. It made me miss New York a lot. I was just like, oh, I miss that, because it is one of those things, except in New York, you're going to see someone's walking around naked that you don't want to see at some point. You're like, oh God. Many times it's happened to me there. I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't look up.
Yeah, it was the first time I felt like he was, we were seeing a lot more sexuality or overt sexuality in his films. Like when we would see the dancer female character and she would just bend over and it was just a shot of her ass. And I was like, do we really need that? No. But of course, he wanted that kind of a thing. So
because there's a truth behind it, because it's very honest. That's happens all the time. Sure. And essentially you see people walking around, you kind of can't help to kind of look. Maybe she should just draw her shades. If
that's why you like to do that. Is I think I do agree with the argument that is a part of the human condition. We call it people watching now, right? Everyone, I love people watching, Yeah. And that's essentially, that's the nice version of being a voyeur. Voyeur seems like, a little more of a pervert, or they're peeping or something like that.
There's been a lot of films that were basically like redos of this, right?
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Tons of them.
It's just like it's alluded to a lot too in pop culture, like in The Simpsons or something, like where a character would be I think even like Suburbia with Shia LaBeouf. That for some reason that popped in my head. I think that was the last film I saw that was this exact plot, him like stuck in a room and like spying on his neighbors, and then suddenly he suspects one of murder and tries to uncover it.
What happens when you have too much time on your hand? That's what I was thinking when I was watching. I'm like, this is what happens when you have
idle hands are the devil's playground.
Yes. Yeah. But I love their wasn't sure if he wanted to be with his God, I can't remember her name. Was it Mary?
I don't know. This is Grace Kelly again.
Grace Kelly's character. I could just look it up, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to be with her because she was just so perfect. I was like, oh God. I was like, how annoying is that?
Again, another love story though.
Yeah.
Right? But behind the murder mystery, there's a love story, almost always.
And then he realized they're good partners in crime.
Yeah. And this is where I feel like this is an example of she was brave. Like she broke into his house, so for all the arguments that like he is very disrespectful to women and things like that. And there is a lot of evidence to this in his films. There are moments where they're the brave heroine, they're going in to save the day a little bit.
Or the men fall victim. The men fall victim to these women, or like the women have more control than people think.
Right. Yeah.
So it depends how you perceive it.
That's actually a good segue to our next film, 1955's To Catch a Thief. So To Catch a Thief tells the story of a retired cat burglar who helps to seek out a new thief that has been copying his old tactics. And he has to make sure he keeps his name clear. So he goes on the hunt to find him or her. And we see that like I don't know. I think a lot of people love To Catch a Thief. This is another one like when you're kind of like, I felt like I was falling asleep. I felt like this one was a little duller to me.
It was. I agree with you. There wasn't a talking dialogue in the beginning. It was just shot. It was just like, I think he just wanted to shoot something that had
he just wanted to like visit his beautiful city.
Yeah, I was like, this is
I guess we'll make a movie here.
My dad was, I watched, my parents love it. And so we all watched it together last night, which was really sweet. And my dad's like, there's a lot of scenes of rooftops. I'm like, well, he's a cat burglar.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a little Easter egg. Would that be an Easter egg? Like, it's a kind of thing where you're like, oh, cat burglar, he's hiding.
Yeah, again, for the good people listening, tweet at us. Who's the To Catch a Thief fans out there? I could see that there was so much potential, because we have Cary Grant. He's this debonair, we love to root. Me and I think Ryan have talked about this, definitely Philip.
Mm-hmm.
We love to root for the bad guys when it's a very particular profession, and like the genius thief characters like Ocean's 11 with Danny Ocean, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
We like to root for these anti-heroes, to make the big score and things like that. And this is kind of that story.
Mm-hmm. It is. My sister and I, we discussed this last night too, that it's kind of like Ocean's 11 and the similarity between George Clooney and
really
Cary Grant, they kind of look alike a little bit. Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah, check it out, guys. But if you fall asleep a little, we won't hold it.
It is a beautiful, aesthetically beautiful film.
Yeah, the cinematography looks great. So the visual language is there. It's just the actual.
Her clothing is amazing. Of course, as the fashion person, like I was like,
master of fashion.
Oh, my mom and I were like, look how stunning. I was like, she just kind of like floats when she walks, Grace Kelly. Like she just floats. It's beautiful. Sorry. Sidetrack.
No, you're good. No, you're good. No, we need tangent corners. So let's move on to, I think, probably the lowest point in this entire filmography, and that is The Trouble with Harry, 1955.
Mm-hmm.
The Trouble with Harry is a story that asks, what happens when you stumble upon a dead body in the woods? This is definitely one that I think you should watch, but it was almost like, I don't think there was a coincidence that this was filmed in the same year. So back in the day, it wouldn't be 4 or 5 years between films. It would be like 1 or 2 a year because they didn't have to rely on these big set pieces or, special effects. They didn't have to wait for those things because they were so plot driven, character driven, narrative driven. And they didn't have the special effects. They didn't have the technology at the time. Mm-hmm. So they were able to really, knock these things out and get them out to the public. And it is still good. Again, it's we're seeing the sub thesis here play out time and time again. It is another story that involves a murder mystery, and at the core of that murder mystery is a love story. And again, we already see, moving on to 1956's The Man Who Knew Too Much. We see
Jimmy Stewart. Sorry.
With Jimmy Stewart. So The Man Who Knew Too Much, which is, fun fact, his own remake. He made The Man Who Knew Too Much, I want to say 20 or 30 years ago in his filmography, and he wanted to make it better, so he did. It tells the story of a man and a woman, so we already have the love angle intact at the beginning.
With Doris Day.
Yeah, that learns too much about an organized crime syndicate's plans about an assassination plot, resulting in the kidnapping of their son and the trials and tribulations of not only trying to stop the assassination plot, but also get their son back to restore their family back whole again.
Very suspenseful.
Yeah, this one was fun. Again, it's not going to hold a candle to our later films, but I think it was fun. I think it was like him realizing the potential of his own ambitions. I think there was a lot of things in his head he wanted to do and that he had never tried. And I think that came together in the culmination of the climax and the ending, because we had what a visual language of seeing this huge orchestra play this incredible classical piece. And we're seeing that edited play out with the hunt for the killer. And I thought that was captivating. I was like, okay,
I agree.
We don't see a lot of that in film of this era until something like this, right?
I thought it was really fun too, kind of like Rear Window, but there's more movement. Obviously, there's like a lot going on.
It's a lot more movement.
There was like
he didn't have a cast on his leg.
It was scenic. There was this. I was just trying to think. Like I was gonna make a joke that it was like there's so many films. It had like an Indiana Jones feel to it at times. with the scenery, because it was in Morocco, right?
Exactly, yeah, and that we dealt with a lot of different cultures and things of that nature. And yeah, you know what? I didn't think about it that way, but that's the beauty of our shows. I agree with you, Miss Parsons. It does kind of have an Indiana Jones feel to it. So yeah, definitely check it out, guys. I think this is another highlight, but for different reasons. I think I didn't get a chance to do this, but I kind of want to watch the original and then watch this one back to back. Maybe I'll do that one day.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
That leads us to 1956 with The Wrong Man. Now, before I give the synopsis, this one was a little bit of a highlight for me in just terms of plot and narrative. Well, more plot than narrative, because it's as much as it focuses more on being a thriller or a suspense piece, it to me, it's a form of horror, because it's a certain kind of horror that still happens to this day, is what it got from it. And because it tells a story of mistaken identity, where a man is accused of robbery and must suffer through the American judicial system to clear his name. So he has to go through so much bullshit. The last time I saw something that was perfectly in this vein is The Night Of. On HBO, where you see a character go through this.
God, it's so anxiety driven.
So essentially being accused for a murder or a crime you didn't commit, but you still have to go through the process, and you're still jailed in a form of prison until the trial can take place. It's just a scary concept, like, because this could technically happen to any of us, and it still happens to this day. We see so many goddamn Netflix documentaries about, some set of a series of serial kills, and then they like just pick these random people that were maybe associated with the scene, and then they're like in prison for decades, and then they finally get their name cleared. I mean, could you imagine that? Half your life being in prison. It's just a scary concept.
It is a scary concept. Yeah, there's a lot of like Netflix documentaries and movies that were, I think, inspired by this. Did you know that Martin Scorsese was influenced apparently by this for Taxi Driver? This film?
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
So yeah, let's focus on the hits. We have made it to Vertigo to start with, 1958. Vertigo is the story of an investigator that is hired to investigate the haunting of a client's wife. But things take a turn for the very strange, when he falls in love with her. She decides to commit suicide, and then a woman that looks absolutely identical to her shows up on his radar, and he aims to turn her into his former love. So I think on a pure cinematography, visual language side, this is my favorite. Because he played so much with color theory in film, and the dream sequences. We had never seen anything like this, and this I would argue, I probably need to do a little more homework on this, but this had to be the birthplace of the psychological thriller, which is my favorite genre to this day.
Same.
I love psychological thrillers. Yeah. And with all the dream sequences and all the things that were going on, this was something we'd never seen before. And when I rewatched it, I was still captivated, except for that ending, which we joked about earlier.
I haven't seen it since I was in college, so when I got to watch it again, I could rewind it a lot. Certain scenes that I really wanted to soak in. Yeah. And I agree with you. And I remember when I first went to San Francisco and being like taking pictures and being there, and I'm like, God, it's so Hitchcock, and being in such a vibe. I'm like, what? I was like, oh yeah, because I watched Vertigo around that time, and it's just like so much has happened in my life since then. So rewatching this was as if I was watching it for the first time, and my mouth dropped because I totally forgot. I was like, man, what a fucking twist! They don't make films like this anymore.
I have a thesis for you for just this film. Okay. I think Vertigo is a perfect analysis of the intersection between obsession and love.
Yeah.
Because there is obsession in love, and love in obsession. And I feel like the movie takes, a little bit, again, he's always, until we get to Psycho, he's always kind of like dipped his toes into horror. They've always been a little more on the thriller suspense side of the stories he likes to tell. But this is an example of like he was dipping his toes more into the horror element when James Stewart started to turn the girl he found into his former love, into the blonde character again.
Well, it's a level up because he was grieving and desperation, and it really resonated with me because I'll get personal with everybody, and I'm open book. It's like my partner, he passed away about almost 3 years ago, or over 3 years ago, and those scenes where he kept seeing her, but it wasn't her, and I've been there, and I was like, oh fuck, that's accurate. And you just like, and it happens with a lot of people who lose somebody. I think that book, Year Magical Thinking, a lot of people say that, like you look and you think you see that person and you follow them. And I did that in New York. I did it too. Yeah. Like I would think I was like, no, that wasn't him, but I would follow that person because I just wanted to like see him for a second, maybe that just someone that looks like him. And it was really sad. So there was like it resonated with me on that level. But then in the obsession, like, would I do that? Like, I was like, oh my God. Like, then he wanted her to dress like her. Right. But I think deep down, he knew inside that it was actually her.
We've talked about Lynch before. This film heavily influenced Mulholland Drive. And I realize how is because, so we're met with the same actress that played both roles. It wouldn't be his client's wife. It was the actress in the film he hired to be his wife before he killed her. So she became this character in the film. That is not the literal character, but the character in the actual story. So well that when we saw her again as a brunette, when he went through the phase of turning her back into the original person he fell in love with, she was so different that I was like, oh my God, because I just thought that's how she acted. And in Mulholland Drive, that was the very first time I remember as like a little kid, I think, seeing it as a young man, the rug really being pulled out from under me because I thought Naomi Watts' character was just going to be like that the whole time. And then when she did that scene in the film, acting as someone else in the film, she was like just riveting, just like it was so intense. And like, I just felt the world stopped moving for me.
I didn't know. Right? My sister probably knows that. I didn't know. So Lynch was inspired by Vertigo with this film.
Yeah, specifically Mulholland Drive.
That makes a lot of sense. But it was a good twist. Should we talk about the very end of it really quickly?
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question
Okay, go for it.
She does actually die, right? And originally it was staged so that the husband could, run away with their money kind of thing. But when she turns back into his vision of what he wanted in terms of his love interest, she falls to the same death. She falls off of the clock tower. And I don't know what it was. I don't know. I keep going back and forth. What does it say to you? Like what?
I kind of so I like awkwardly laughed at that scene, but I've done that with like a lot of
it was abrupt and it was a silly. There was no build up to it.
When
it was
things like, are random,
it just kind of happened.
Yeah, I think I was like, okay, I guess he just wanted to end it that way. I guess he just wanted her to die because he usually has them kind of like in Marnie, they go off. They kind of like resolve things at the end, and same thing in like Rear Window. They like work things out, and you could. But this one, she's like, we're just gonna kill her off. I think I really honestly feel like he was just
what I guess I'm asking, what do you feel like it's trying to say in terms of the story?
Trying to figure that out. I wish somebody tweet us or something. But my to go is like that relationship was always a lie.
Yeah, like I guess that's the closest thing I got is that betrayal. When it comes to betrayal, there's never a happy ending. Like he tried to turn her into the woman and fall in love and tried to continue what they had, but when he learned of the reality of their relationship, that he was betrayed, it only ends in sorrow. And in this, it would be literal sorrow because she ended up dying. That's the closest thing I had.
And there's no way he'd be with her because she was the woman. Kim Novak, is that her name? The actress? Part of a murder because she allowed that to happen, even though she said she did it she was going to snap her neck, right? Or he was going to kill his wife. I think she said that. She's like,
I don't remember that part of the plot.
I didn't know she was going to be, I don't know, something like that. She tried to act like she wasn't sure what was going to happen. That there was no way that wasn't really the person he fell in love with. It was a lie, and that she clearly couldn't live with herself anymore. So she just very melodramatic. My dad said, he's like, oh, Hitchcock films, so melodramatic. But the acting
they're very melodramatic.
Yeah, he's like, the acting of this time was just so corny.
It came from the theater, and yeah, it wasn't, like we grew up with already this sea change. We saw it kind of in the 80s of we wanted the directors were telling the actors, no, we want to make it as real looking as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You should be interacting with each other as if you would do it in real life. And we see that probably to a fault nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, where it's like everything has to be dark and gritty and raw and real. And sometimes we just want to have fun at the movies and have escapism and shit. So there is a pendulum effect there. But yeah, back then it was a lot of overacting,
very stylized. Yeah, very
exactly.
stylized.
Very like theatrical.
The way women would swoon, like, oh my God. And their their mouth would like push up against the wall or something. You're
I
like,
can't
what?
even, they put their forehead over their
oh my God.
their forearm over their forehead.
Who acts like that in real life? Nobody.
I do. Okay. Spoiler alert. No, kidding.
Your wife's like, can you stop?
Could you? Novo, God. That leads us to North by Northwest, 1959. North by Northwest tells the story of a man on the run after being mistook by a shadowy organization as a high-profile spy, seeking to prevent him from blocking their plan to smuggle out a microfilm from the country that contains government secrets. Before I pass it back to you, I want to say that I had to look this up, so a little deep diving here. So I was like, as I was watching this, I was like, this is a fucking Bond movie. This is how it feels to me. And I was like, okay, did the Bond films come out before this or after or what? So the actual book, the very first book in Mr. Fleming's series, Casino Royale, that had the James Bond character, was in 1952. So it was 7 years before this film came out. So what I think is that the actual novelizations probably inspired Hitchcock. And then when they made this movie, or I would say Hitchcock in a way, but more so the writer, the screenplay writer for this film. But clearly the film itself, so this is definitely Hitchcock, inspired the look of James Bond movies to come. So the very first film adaptation was in 1962, 3 years later, and that was Dr. No. This other form of art inspired this art, and then that art was inspired the film adaptations of that original art. Like it's always very cyclical, and I find that fascinating to see how these things connect to each other. Now, Ms. Parsons in our pre-show said she wasn't crazy about North by Northwest. Do tell.
I just fell asleep. I'm sorry, guys. Like, I'm going to be very honest.
It wasn't as exciting. I actually thought it was pretty exciting. I wish he was a spy, though.
I'm going to rewatch it.
I wish that was the plot twist at the end, that he was one of the spies the whole time.
Yeah.
And he was just like a regular fucking dude that just got caught up in this, because again, I already said this as part of the intro to the discussion section, that he loves these themes. He likes mistaken identity stories. So I think this is still, again, in terms of narrative, so plot, characters, development of the storyline, character arcs, a la narrative, and the cinematography, I think it was excellent. Is it the best of the hits, which is Vertigo, this, North by Northwest, Psycho, and the Birds? I don't know. I don't think so.
I think you're right. People who love Bond films will obviously love this. My brother was like,
I love Bond films.
My brother's like, oh, North by Northwest is my favorite, and Psycho. He's like, I think those are his best films. Those were done back to back, basically, like a year apart. Exactly. I said, I looked at him today. I go, I fell asleep watching North by Northwest. I tried 2 times watching it. Like I don't. And he's like, really? It's so amazing. And he went into like a thing, and I was like, I gotta keep watching Stage Fright. Get out of here. I was like really focused.
I don't got time for this shit.
No, but like my mom likes it too. My dad's like, North by Northwest was a little too slow for me. Like he's like, I didn't enjoy it as much as I really loved Vertigo.
I have to disagree. I thought it was pretty fast paced for these standards of films at the time, mind you.
But yeah, it was okay. I'm gonna rewatch it. I think I just had a lot going on this week, and I was cramming. I was a bad researcher, and I was cramming a lot.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We'll talk about a different mental state, and that is in 1960s Psycho.
Fuck yes.
So Psycho tells the story of a woman on the run, played by Janet Leigh. I'm mentioning the actual actress name for a very important reason, and we'll get to that, who meets an untimely demise by the hands of a motel owner and operator and goes through the trials and tribulations of the people in her life that seek out to discover what happened. I want to start with this. I think of all of the parts, I think it really came together with Psycho. And I think that's why it's the most celebrated. And I would agree. I think as a film as a whole, when you add up the performances and the direction and the look of the film and all these and just the plot and the narrative and the suspense. Yeah. And the horror, this created the slasher film genre.
The serial killer, the original. We didn't know what serial killer
I think
was
this
then.
one is the best. Yeah. Of the films of it, as much as I liked Vertigo more for the color theory and the look of it, I think that definitely wins in that category over Psycho, partly because Psycho went back to black and white.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
It was on a smaller budget, but I think it actually added to it with the horror, because they could play with a lot of the lighting and the look of the film because it was black and white.
And he brought a new fear to the public.
Exactly.
Hotels and the fear of the middle-aged white man, which we are still very afraid of.
We're still very
we are still petrified of that man.
So. And that's why I mentioned Janet Leigh. So that had never been, I got to give credit where credit's due. So our producer, Clayton Anderson, actually brought this to my attention that had never been done before in a film. And I didn't even think about it that way, that they killed off a high-profile actress and character right away. They killed Janet Leigh's character, and this was also the mother of Jamie Lee Curtis. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh well, it was like something I should have known, but it just didn't dawn on me. Oh, but that is true. I guess this was the first of that kind of revelation, if you will. And I just think it really came all together, and it's an excellent film.
It was
full stop.
Yeah.
All right, see you guys.
Yeah, bye. It was an excellent film. What's to say? Still lives up.
It's very timeless.
Of course, I still laugh at the end when you see his face and you realize it's like he's in the mom's wig and stuff. And like, I think I just laugh at awkwardness a lot, and I find it. And I joyfully laugh. I don't laugh because it's bad. I laugh because I'm like, fuck yes, this is amazing.
I also think this is a first of its kind for the subject matter. Like we've never seen mental illness portrayed on film like this ever before either. That he had like split personalities.
And they described it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The psychiatrist came out. I saw the remake a long time ago, which got terrible
with Vince
reviews.
Vaughn.
Yeah, and it was terrible. And I remember being like, what the fuck? But
stick to comedy.
They did it so much better because in the new Vince Vaughn's one they did, like they actually had the psychiatrist talking to him in this white room. Whereas in this one, you don't see them talking. He just comes out. So you leave that to your imagination of what that conversation was like. Mm-hmm. You actually really don't see much of him speaking in his mom's voice. Like you just see, so there's that mystery still there. Yeah. I mean, you see him at the end trying to, at the end you see him in his mom's robe and the wig and everything. Right. But the way that he explains it and the dialogue, it's just very like he does it in layman terms because we didn't have that then. Like there wasn't an explanation. And split personality disorder, even till now, is very much debated within the psychiatric world. So it was I found it, and I love anything. I think that's why I love psychological thrillers. I love anything that has to do with psychology and serial killers, and I'm that girl.
Absolutely. And then we take another turn with The Birds, 1963. The Birds tells the story of when literal birds, usually innocuous, become dangerous and predatory, and how a group of people trapped in the middle look to escape the horror of the birds. So we have to talk about this. There's a little bit of an elephant in the room. Like we talked about this in our Coco Chanel show, where sometimes you shouldn't meet your heroes. That's why we've always focused on the art. And I read that he was very abusive. There was accounts of him being abusive to Tippi Hedren, who was the lead female character in this film. And God, it's a shame. Again, we have to touch on that because I feel like the more we get into the histories of these things, the more we learn the darker corners of all these
I didn't
people's
know
private
about
lives.
this.
Yeah, I actually didn't know about it until like yesterday, until the day before we decided to record this. And I was like, oh God, fuck me, him too. Like we cannot win. So of course we don't condone any of that behavior against any people. We should all get along. But
what did he do? What was the?
He was, I think, he had made sexual advances against Tippy, and he was very controlling. And then in the scenes that, we'll talk about this in a minute. It was a technically profound film. I feel like of all these 4 big hits, I mean, the amount of practical and special effects and puppetry and use of live birds, like they really pulled it off for 1963 of making the birds scary, which is not a scary film today, but back then in 1963 you could see why people were petrified of this concept. We see this all the time too, before we get there. But yeah, he was like just controlling. I think there was sexual advances, and she was trapped in a contract, and for her times, I don't think anybody believed her. And I think only until 2012 that there was a piece dedicated to what you actually went through.
I'm glad the light finally came out, and I'm also not surprised.
It always does, though. That's my philosophy. It's like, things will always come to light, no matter what.
You wave a dollar bill in front of somebody's face, and some power, and they change.
Yeah, like things. Yeah,
they get
this
weird.
was a height of his fame
people get
too.
Weird. Yeah.
Yeah. So there has to be a part. Of course, we have to say for legal reasons that, again, these were allegations. Nothing were proved at the time, things like that. But again, you just study the evidence, and you can come to your own conclusions that maybe there was some abusive practices going on here. So with that being said, The Birds was okay. I don't know. I guess I'm so used to the level of horror we have today and the technical abilities, with special effects and things like that. I get it on a fundamental level, fundamentally, because I think I have a fear of like big bugs, spiders and things like that. And I get it, like these birds became like locusts, like biblical locusts, and they were swarming. That idea of being swarmed and eaten alive and things of that nature is petrifying. Yes. So I kind of get it on that level. And for him to use, of all creatures, birds, like the least scary predatory animals on the planet, because birds are often, signs of like doves, of innocence and purity and virginity and all these things. And so I guess that's why he did it that way. But I thought it was a solid okay. I think on a technical level, I think it's why it's so alarming.
I gave it 4.5 stars. I do the stars rating. So I love,
yeah.
Why do I do the star rating, or why did I get
No. Yeah, why did you give it
I loved
rating? Out of 5 stars, right?
Yeah, out of 5 stars, I gave it 4.5. Well, it was very popular among like the art house crowd, kind of the kids, like the art kids. A lot of fashion, like costume contests. You would always see girls being dressed as the birds. That was like a big thing. Like, another art girls dressed up as the birds. Like there was like one of the, I think a lot of art
like
kids.
As an actual bird.
No, they dress up as Tippi Hedren with like the suit and the bird attacking her, like blood coming off.
Okay.
Like it was very like.
I'm picturing like one of your colleagues or friends in this huge bird costume.
One of my favorite characters of that film was the lady that knew all about the birds. And she was just like,
seagulls? No, I'm kidding.
No, the seagulls. No, it was the woman that knew all about the birds, and she was talking about it. But like, they don't ever confirm it. But the reason why the birds were attacking is because the lovebirds were in the cage. They just wanted the lovebirds out. Right? Did you get that? That's the whole thing.
I did not. No.
I was like, it's the lovebirds that they kept, because they kept putting to it. And she's like, Mom, can I have the lovebirds? And they were just really calm. I'm like, it was a moment she got there with the lovebirds in the cage, and the birds were like, what the fuck? And something about whatever, maybe it was a frequency. That's the whole time. I was like, that's it. It's the lovebirds. Did anybody else get that? Like that's
I did not get that.
So I didn't research it, but that's what I
No, that's a very good theory. No, I like it. Let's
cool.
stick with that.
Okay.
And then we get to end our list with 1964's Marnie. Marnie tells the story of a confidence woman that steals from her unlikely employers. But when she tries to steal from a man that is also in love with her, when he discovers her history of crime, he blackmails her into marrying him. But he finds that he might have gotten more than he bargained for, and ultimately tries to save her from herself. Marnie is, I think, actually, I'm going to start with a quote from you, Miss Parsons. It's kind of like a Lifetime movie that we have today. Like
the original Lifetime movie.
Original Lifetime movie. Very melodramatic. I actually, because you said that before, I actually saw it, so it did kind of prime my brain a little bit. I think I liked it a little more than what a original Lifetime movie is today.
Yeah. Of course.
But you did start to see this decline again in his film quality, especially after these last four were just so huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's still good. A lot of historians consider Marnie a classic too, believe it or not. But I don't really quite feel that way. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I'd enjoyed it so much for how absurd it was. Like, I found it so entertaining. I was like talking out loud watching it. Like, this is like the epitome of a toxic relationship. Sure. Like, this should be played in every like a marriage counseling. Don't do this. I don't know.
We don't have time for a regular session, but here, watch Marnie.
This is hilarious. I just thought it was so. And then he was manipulating her and bribing her, blackmailing her because he was in love with her. I'm like, this is so fucked. I just thoroughly enjoyed it for the absurdity of it.
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah, I will still say there was a lot of directorial skill being shown here for sure. Give it a watch. We got to see Sean Connery, be the debonair leading man. He was perfect at that. Jesus Christ.
He slapped her at one point, and then I thought about Sean Connery, how he loved to talk about sometimes a woman needs a good slap, and you're
oh God, Jesus.
You're like, oh no. Oh no! I was like, oh, there it is. There's his slapping of the woman, which I do not.
God. But let's focus on the art. So let's bring it on home and tie a bow on this bee. So tell the good people, Miss Parsons, why should we study these classic films?
And I will say this.
Why not?
Why not? Time and time again, you need to watch where things come from to understand where they are now. That's kind of my motto.
Yeah.
And he inspired many thrillers. He invented the thriller. We didn't know what the thriller was until Hitchcock came along.
Right.
The true thriller. Yeah, he started it. That was him. He was the originator of it and of suspense. And until you watch his films, you're not going to really understand what that means, the Master of Suspense, until you watch his stuff. And aesthetically and artistically, he was an innovator. Yeah, he was very eccentric, and you see that in his films. And I think eccentric minds do tend to create really amazing art.
So there you have it, guys. Alfred Hitchcock's filmography from 1950 to 1965. I want to thank you for listening. I, of course, want to thank my guest, Miss Alexandra Parsons, for being here today. Of course, before we go, we got a little more for you, a little icing on the cake, a little cherry on top with what we call the Gem of the Week. If you're new to the show here and don't know what the Gem of the Week is, it's essentially something we like to talk about here at the end of our shows that doesn't always fit into the scheme of the episode because it may just be on our radar in the last day or week or maybe even month, but we want to give it to you guys so you guys can dig deeper. Today's gems are brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr is our go-to tool for remote podcast recordings. What's great is that you can record separate audio and video tracks, and it's all backed up on a secured cloud, so you never lose your hard work. Even better, it's easy to use, and there's nothing to download. So go to zen.ai, that's zen.ai/Art of the Beholder, or just use promo code Art of the Beholder and get 30% off your first 3 months with a pro account. Now back to the gems. I'm going to be short and sweet. I really, on a different kind of film perspective, there's some animated shorts on Disney Plus called I Am Groot, about Groot. There's something about Baby Groot that I absolutely love. I find his character very cute and silly and fun. And there's 5 or 6 5-minute shorts on Disney Plus right now, and they're a lot of fun. And I have a very special gem because the beauty of this show and getting to meet someone like Miss Parsons and our other guests and so on, and some guests in the future that you guys haven't heard yet, is I get to meet a lot of amazing new artists, blossoming artists, and that have some incredible potential. And I can't wait to see how they evolve. And one of those is a guy I met recently online that goes by the moniker The Monarch. He likes to make electronic music, and he's a little new to the scene, so I just wanted to give him a shout out. He may be on the show one day, who knows? So keep making music, and we'll keep listening. Miss Parsons, what do you got for us?
I have the new season of What We Do in the Shadows has been out, and it's what's great. It's only like 20-30 minutes, and it's hilarious. And yeah,
check it out, guys. Yeah, and if you like that, of course, you can check out our stuff at novadayproductions.com. There you'll find things like the Entropy Sessions, Post Meridium, Adulteration, Cancel Culture Lotto, of course, the show. You'll see ads for the show, and our other shows. And of course, there's more to come. So don't forget to follow us at _Novo_Day, and Day is just DE, and at Nova Day Media. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I don't have time for the rest of the outro, so just, you know what to do. Just do the things. And rate and review. Who cares? And if you'd like to sponsor our little love child here, you know what to do. Okay? Yeah, you got it. And if you want to get a hold of Miss Parsons, tell the good people how they can connect.
Yeah, find me on Instagram. It's Alexandra_Parsons. You can see all my designs. Contact me for any illustration work or any questions you have about art, design, or painting. Also, alexandraparsons.com.
There you go. And until next time, you know what to do. Be good to each other. And as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love ya.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created and hosted by Novo Day and the Novo Day Collective. Facebook.com/Novo Day Media. At Novo Day Media on Twitter and Instagram. Music by A Company. Facebook.com/ACOMusic123. ACO on Spotify. Logo designed by Tom Justice, JESTUS, of thejusticecompany.com. And executively produced by Clayton Anderson. All rights reserved.
Of Jimmy Stewart.